Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Holly, and I'm from Ann Arbor. And not only am I from Ann Arbor, I'm an alcoholic. All weekend we have been talking about, remember I said the word about, the grace of God. For one moment, please, those of you that wish to, let's talk to him. Let's say pray the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you. How would you like for someone to constantly going around telling someone else how much they loved you? Wouldn't you want them to tell you that instead of telling everybody else? First, I want to thank you for inviting me to be here. It's really been a pleasure. And anyone that lives in this beautiful place and you don't appreciate it, I hope the sheriff runs you out of town. Because it is beautiful. We've spoken about how wonderful, what a beautiful job the chairmen have done, and they really have. I have never seen a more laid-back chairman than J.D. down there. And his two henchmen are marvelous. And I'm talking about Neil and Gonzalez. All he has to do is say jump, and they ask how high. You know. They both are sweet. I have adopted them as my sons. Everywhere I go, I adopt somebody as my and I think that they're just lovely. All of you are just beautiful people. You know one thing? You really are. You are very, all you got to do is get this side of the Rockies and you will find, and I'm not lying because you see, after all, I don't have to lie to you. I didn't ask you could I come here. You invited me. You know? So I don't need to lie to you. But all you've got to do is just get west of the Rockies and you will find the sweetest, lovingest, kissingest, huggingest, eatingest people you ever seen in your life. You know? You are, I mean it, you really are, you're beautiful people, and I love every one of you, and I thank you again and again for letting me be, with God's help, a part of this wonderful organization. And you know another thing, I like this, you know, together we can make it, because you know, it had just been a few days prior to being invited here that I used those words, and I'll tell you in what context I use those words. There was a young lady, you know how pride does get in the way of our wanting to be sober. Our pride gets in the way of admitting that you're an alcoholic. And this young lady was telling me, she was saying, oh, just think, just look at me, and what a condition I'm in. My people came and established, or whatever you do to a country. They came over here in a covered wagon, and now just look at me now. To think, do you realize my ancestors, oh, she went on and on about her ancestors coming over in a covered wagon. And look at me now, I said, darling, mine came over in chains, but look at me now. I don't know. You may not like me before I leave, but that's okay. I said to my group, I had to be gone last weekend and this weekend, and I said to my group, I said, well, girls, I belong to a women's group, my home group. I said, girls, I'm going to be gone away for a couple of weekends, but I'd like to know what topic that you're going to talk on before I leave, you know. I should never have said that. One of them piped up and said, gratitude. I said, so you see, I am well loved. I guess that's the reason why I love working and being around the new people so much. For the simple reason is, now you see, I want you to know, now, I'm not a dictator, nor the type of person that likes to dominate people. I like to, you know, instruct people. There's a difference between dominating a person and instructing a person. Now, you ask any Al-Anon if that isn't true. There's a difference there, you know. You see, it certainly is, you know. I am not here this morning to give you my autobiography. I don't feel that that's necessary. The mere fact that I was born, that's obvious. I'm here, you know. When I was born is none of your business. But I will tell you this, I'm in the last half of the 9th inning, but I'm still up at bat. You know. I've been around a day or two. Through the grace of God and this fellowship, you know. I must have a few more old critters around here, you know. To begin to tell you what brought me here. Well, you know, someone asked me, how did you ever get there? How did you ever, what started the whole thing? I wished I could get there. I said, well, it's simple, just drink wine. That's what I did. You know. Now, I don't want you to think that I am a wino. I was not a wino. Women are not winos. I was a winette. And I had my share of it, you know. I started drinking this stuff quite early. Now, wine wasn't my first drink. You know, the big book tells us our stories reveal in a general way what we used to be like and what happened and what we're like now. Well, my dear, I got to catch a plane. I can't go into all what I used to be like. But the mere fact is, what I like to tell you is what happened. Just briefly, what I used to be like. And anybody in here that has ever drank to any degrees, you know that feeling of when you wake up in the, you can't call it morning, I'll say when you wake up, and it's 6, and you don't know what 6 it is, you know. The clock just says 6. And you gotta go to the bathroom and somebody's gonna ask you, are you just now getting up or are you coming in? And so you don't go to the bathroom, you don't want to answer that. You want a drink of water and you're scared they're going to ask you the same question, so you just lay there and suffer at both ends, so you don't do that. You don't bother about that. And of course I know most of you are a lot younger than I, and I don't know whether you ever, shall we say, visited pawn shops or not, and I was one of those that did that too. I had a watch that stayed in the pawn shop so much it wouldn't run on a Jewish holiday, you know. So I know about all those things, and so we won't go into all that. I did, shall we say, get married. Marriage is like vaccinations. On me, they don't take. But I always wanted something that was mine. I wanted some children, you know. Well, if I know what I know now, that I had the children and forgot the rest. I know I'll take that back. But nevertheless, what brought me here? What happened? After a number of years, more than I care to talk about, with my wine and whatnot. See, I always drank wine because I felt that was not my first drink. My first drink, I got that when I was about 14 years old at home. My grandfather he was not an alcoholic, but he had some alcohol there, whiskey in the bottle, and with rock candy and stuff, and I'd see him come in and take a sip out of it for his arthritis, and I tried that, and it worked, you know, arthritis or not. But you see, there was one thing that I liked about wine. Wine, I always felt, if you drank wine, it was sophisticated to drink wine. You know, it gives you an air of sophistication if one drank wine. Now, you ever imagine anybody drinking Mad Dog being sophisticated? My favorite beverage, you know. But after going through all of this, and as I said, I got married there, and I had 2 kids, and I'm not going to go into all that. The marriage didn't last too long. He was a gambler, and he was throwing it away faster than I could drink it up, so he had to get going. I couldn't be bothered with that. And naturally one has to have a job, and I had one. I worked in the bar. I believed in on-the-job training. That was very nice. But finally, all of those good things, you know, have to come to an end. And you see, I have to tell you one thing to make my point, and that is this. When I came to this fellowship, I thought I was a helpless, hopeless drunk. That's exactly what I thought. And I'll tell you why I thought this way. I lived in this very small community, and we had this very small church. I'll never tell you that I was a practicing Catholic. I was a practicing alcoholic that went to Catholic church. And we were going to have a festival to celebrate our little schoolhouse. And we had the 4 first black nuns in the state of Michigan. And of course, like all good alcoholics, I went to help out. And have you ever said, I will not drink, I'm not going to drink nothing right now, you know, but you finally, until you learn this, find out about this fellowship, you think of this. Well, you hear something, it's something like, I got to go where the wild goose goes, or words to that effect. Well, when I got there at this grand celebration, and it was a celebration, it was really something, you know, and almost as great as the one because when you people pulled off this one, and this is a humdinger you got here today. I mean, you go all out. I thought you was going to fire a cannon the other night. Well, now, getting back to this celebration I was talking about, when I got there, I went right straight to, I asked Mother Superior right off the reel. I said, Mother, is there anything I can help you do? And she says, no, darling, go and enjoy yourself. Never tell a practicing alcoholic to go and enjoy yourself. But I went to the caretaker's house, and there he had a bottle of wine, but it wasn't my kind of wine, it was cooking wine, you know. And he was, all the adults, you know, and during this celebration, he was giving them all a little drink out of one of these little insult glasses about like that, you know. And I had me gratitude there. And so the first thing you know, they ran out. And so then I thought, you know, I would go and replenish the stock, and I got them their kind and my kind. Well, you know what happened. So by now I think, no, maybe I'd better go over here and help Mother Superior, ask Mother Superior if there's anything I can do. So on the way out, one of our good parishioners was making barbecue. And I thought, well, maybe I'd better eat something that'll straighten me out a little bit, you know. It did. I took the barbecue rib, and he wasn't waiting on me fast enough, and I stuck it down in the sauce about up to here. And another one of our parishioners had the unmitigated nerve to say, Holly Martin, you can't do that. Well, she shouldn't have said that to me. Now they tell me, and I presume that I did, that I took the rib and I hit her, they said, I waved it around the time. Now I tried to justify this, you know. I said, well, Samson took the jawbone of an ass and wiped out a whole army. How come I can't hit her with one rib of a pig, you know? Well, she got to be so snobbish. Well, anyway, I went home. Now, here is where the beginning of my knowing that I am a helpless, hopeless drunk. On my living room wall, I had a large picture of our divine Lord. You see, I was so very ashamed of what I had done. If I could have fell down in a manhole, you see, when I got to, throwing that rib around, the nuns in those days wore these bibs. They had spots, looked like they'd been killing bibs also. When I got home, I looked at that picture on the wall, and I said, Dear God, if ever again in my life I take a drink, strike me dead. I meant that. I meant it. I was so ashamed of what I had done in front of all of these. I wasn't ashamed of hitting her, but I was ashamed of hitting her in front of these people, See, most of the time, we're not ashamed of what we do. We're just ashamed we get caught doing what we do. We're not ashamed of what we do. So anyway, I said, well, I know what I'll do. I meant this when I said, Dear God, please, never again. So the next day, the good father sent for me, bless his heart, and here come two nuns down the street, and they drugged me up the street. Everybody come out in the street, out of the pool room, grocery store. What's Martin done now, you know? They take me up here before the good father, and he was fresh out of pledges that day. And he said, Howie, I want you to promise me one thing, that you will never again take a drink until you see me take a woman into my house. To this I readily agreed, you know, anything to get him off my back. But on the way home, I got to thinking, I can't hang around here and watch this man and see what he's going to do. I said, maybe I ought to get a six-pack and think that over. You know. So when I got home, I looked at the picture and I said, Lord, I didn't mean beer, you know. And then it wasn't long before I was drinking whiskey, and I said, God, I didn't mean whiskey. Finally, I'm back on wine, and I said, God, just forget it. So that was the beginning of my knowing that I was a helpless, hopeless alcoholic. You know, I knew that. Now, another thing had happened that brought this to me. See, I loved those children of mine very dearly. I won't go into all that. Now I look at that love, it was a great deep possessiveness. They're mine. You see, I was an orphan and something to have something of mine. One morning I couldn't get up off the couch. And my son at that time, see, my children are always used to me being up doing something or other. And to see mother laying on the couch and can't get up, you know, they wonder what the world is wrong with mother. And I said, son, go across the street, and I called this lady's name, and I said, go and ask her. And I hate beer. I said, go over there and ask her if she got anything to drink. And he came back with two of the most despicable cans of beer that you can give anybody. Gobles and Pfeiffer's, horrible stuff. But I drank them down immediately, and my two children stood there looking at me. And I saw something in my children's eyes. In other words, it was a hurt. You see, before any time I had ever been ill with the flu or a bad cold, they waited on me hand and foot. And now here's mother laying here, and we don't know what to do for her. Man, I'm going to tell you something. That tore me up. Yeah. I looked at that hurt in those eyes. God. But still, powerless over alcohol. Finally, one Saturday night, I happened to be in my living room. No, kitchen. Started in the kitchen. The miracle started in the kitchen. Story came on over the radio. It was called The Glass Crutch, and it was about a woman that had a drinking problem. Now, I did not turn that radio on to that station because when you're in my condition, you just buy a radio and you plug it in, the thing plays till it gives out, you know. And you hear voices all the time in the house, so what difference does it make? There's a radio and you can't turn them off. But it was about a woman that had a drinking problem. And to this day, my friends, I don't remember the ingredients. It simply said, if you need our help, we'll be the first number in the book. Well, I thought, I don't need your help, you know. That was 6 or 7 years prior to my coming into this fellowship that I heard that story, you know. 6 or 7 years. You see, the book of books tells us the story of the sower. The sower that went out to sow the seed, you know. And some of the seed fell by the wayside, and the birds got them. You know, that's the person that comes in and going to rewrite the big book. The birds going to get him. You know, right now. And then the seed, some of it fell on stony ground. And for a while, it flourished. It grew up. But because it had no depth, it soon withered away. That's the person that comes in and says, I don't need the spiritual. I don't want none of that spiritual. I don't buy that. You can't buy the grace of God. If you did, you'd all be on the welfare. You can't buy it anyway. You know? And then again, the sower goes out to sow seed, and this time it falls among the thorns and the thistles. And because it is such a delicate little thing, the thorns and thistles crowd it out. That's the person that thinks. He can hold on to his old ideas. The thorns and thistles is going to get you. And then again the sower goes out to sow seed, and this time it falls on fertile ground. You see, for a long time, the seed was on fertile ground. My ground was fertile. It was steeped in manure, kids. It was fertile. But I didn't know what to do about it. Finally, that day came, but I didn't understand what the words the glass crutch meant. Finally, the day came when I was sitting in my living room. Now, those words had come to my mind when I'd be walking down the street, the glass crutch, the glass crutch. The clock seemed to say at times, the glass crutch, the glass crutch. Finally, this day, I'm sitting in my living room trying to read the newspaper, and it seemed as if every word on there said the glass crutch, and I said, my Lord, what does this mean? And I looked down at my hand, and there I was holding the glass crutch, reading the newspaper upside down, or however you read one when you're drunk. Now, it would sound dramatic to say I dropped the paper and I ran to the phone and called the number, but you know, after sitting there for a while, I did look in the book. I was hoping that there was a line, that it wasn't in there, but it was there. First number in the book, and I called, and the lady said, I told her I got a friend out here. I think she's losing her mind. I said, would you send somebody out to talk to her? And the lady said, would you like to have somebody talk to you? And I said, oh, no. Sooner or later, I'm right back there again, and I called, and she said, we'll have someone call you. And she did. And this woman called me, and she said one of the stupidest things you could ever say to a person. She said, now, if you've got anything out there to drink, get rid of it. I did. I drank it up. Now, I had reached the stage of zombieism. That is, if you don't drink, you don't get sober. If you do drink, you don't get drunk. You ever been in a state of zombieism? I mean, plain old zombieism. You know, somebody holds your hand up and stays there, you know. But, you know, alcohol is everything the big book says it is, cunning, baffling, and powerful for about 45 minutes. After that lady came out to my house, she told me she was going to take me to a meeting. And she said one of the most remarkable things that you could say to anyone. I told her, I said, I got to do something on account of these kids. And I told her about that look I had seen in my children's eyes and how badly it hurt me. She said, you're not going to stay sober for your children, you're going to stay sober for yourself. That's the greatest thing anybody ever told me. Do it for yourself, and I'm telling you that. Do it for yourself, you know. Okay. About 45 minutes before going to that first meeting, two lush-haired buddies of mine came by there, and they gave me 2 drinks of something, and it was the same as pouring coal oil on dying embers. I got drunk. You know, I was higher than a kite, and the woman come back. But we went to that meeting that night. And, you know, they read out of the big book, and that's the only thing I can remember of that meeting. The next morning when I woke up, these words came to my mind. Rarely have we ever seen a person fail. That's all I think about. Rarely have we ever seen I said, well, I'm going back to another meeting because I'm going to find out what they're drinking that rarely ever fails. And I'm going back and to find it out. And I went back and I found out that they weren't, you know. I cannot say that I fell madly in love with my sponsor the way that I see some people love their sponsors. I didn't love mine like that. Oh, she had buck teeth and I was scared of her. And she kept pulling out this who me. Just answer yes to say, dear, and you're in. I thought, this old Biddy must be getting 50 cents a yes. Is drinking clouding your reputation? Well, if you've been in the fog over 20 years, how do you know whether it's cloudy or not? Do you seek a lower environment while drinking? Heavens, no, I merely created a lower environment while drinking. And then she asks a very dumb question. Do you prefer to drink alone? If I'm buying it, yes. If you're buying it, no. You know, dumb people. But you see, she stuck with me. You know, she really did. She stuck with me. See, when I came into the fellowship, you know, they ever called you up and asked you, would you like to go to a meeting this morning or this evening? No, I'll be by for you. That's all. I'll be by for you. You know, if you don't want to be haunted. You know, after you've got into this, then you're fairly new. Have you ever once stopped and thought, now what in the hell did I do this for? We're not in bad enough condition without calling somebody up and telling them about it, you know. And I thought about my sponsor like a lot of men feel about their wives at times. I wish you'd go away, but don't go so far I can't find you if I need you. You know, that's the way I felt about her, you know what I'm saying. And she not only did she sponsor me, she enlisted some more that was about as bad as her, you know, one of those kind of things. And I suppose today, I guess maybe I might sponsor somewhat the same way. I don't know. But, well, beautiful girl down there just giving me a pen that says tough love, see, so I got a right to go home and raise hell. But as time went on, I began to learn, this one thing this woman was constantly talking about was discipline. Discipline. One must discipline themselves. Well, I wasn't the type of person that believed in too much of discipline to begin with. I didn't have too much of discipline in my home with my kids. You know, after all, if you wake up with a hangover and you know, and your kids is making a lot of noise, you don't be hitting anybody. You give them a quarter and send them to the show and say, look, I'll get you next time, you know. And you don't hit somebody and you got a hangover. You don't do that. And then on top of that, I always was too full of remorse to be beating on people because, you know, you go around feeling bad about yourself. My children loved me anyway. They thought I was a wonderful mother. I don't know how they feel now, but they thought that then. And they woke up in the morning and they wanted popsicles for breakfast. They got popsicles. So, you know, you don't have to cook no popsicle, you know. But I have learned, my friends, that discipline. And I wonder where the word discipline came from so much. You know? And I learned, my friends, to be disciplined. One becomes a disciple. You know? This program to me is discipleship. You know? See, friends, there's one thing that you and I need to constantly bear in mind after we have accepted this. See? That we are disciples. A disciple is the one that has a message because he has disciplined himself to the extent of listening, you know, and then he can. As the big book tells you, obviously you cannot transmit that which you do not have, and that's the truth. Now, we're not going to become disciplined overnight. Now, you see, I still get a little rebellious every once in a while, you know, every once in a while, you know, Holly Martin is still there as far as that's concerned. But then I learned also, my friends, that there had been a pattern laid down for you and I to follow. You see, when the world was new from the hands of Almighty God, He had given us 10 commandments, 10 doses of medicine because the world was sick. 10 doses. But then people like me came along. As the big book says, some are sicker than others. And we had to have 12 doses, the 12 steps. 2 more. See? Before you and I could accept discipleship. And then, you know, I look at these 12 disciples that our divine Lord had picked out to follow Him. And in each one of them, I noticed the different personalities of each one and how discipline and discipleship formed each one of them, how they changed, and how you and I change when we become disciples of these 12 steps and of the big book. You know? See, that first step that we had where we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives become unmanageable reminds me of one of our divine Lord's followers, Peter. Because that first step, like Peter, it brings me the message of humility. And brother, that's a tough one to come by. How I can identify with this disciple by the name of Peter? He was impulsive, impetuous, loud, boisterous, but he was a born leader, but his life was unmanageable. And in spite of all of these things, he was still full of fear and cowardice. You know, if you can remember, he was a disciple that told when our divine Lord said, "You will deny me," and he said, "Oh, no, Lord, not me." But you see, the time of testing had not come. How many times have you and I said, "Oh, I'll never take another drink"? That's before we found the fellowship. Never again. But like Peter, the time of testing hadn't come. What happened to Peter? Why? What happened to him was just exactly this. He was afraid of rejection, and he was a coward. And the same thing sometimes happens to us. He was afraid of ridicule. He was afraid of not being accepted. He was afraid of persecution, you know. And sometimes even you and I know me, I did. I couldn't accept these things. Persecution. Then, the stupidity of the whole thing, I'm letting alcohol persecute me all the time. But, we want to remain so anonymous. But how anonymous are you when you're drunk, Everybody in town knows about it, You ever wake somebody up and tell them you're drunk, See, many of the times before I came here, I said, never again. You remember that morning I told you about? Never again will I take a drink. But the time of testing had not come, And finally, Peter's last denial, he stood there, as the book of books tells me, warming his hands by the fire beside of the centurion, warming his hands. He's getting too close. Many times when I see these places, and say, oh, come on, you can come to here, you can go there. I don't want to stand there warming my hands by the fire of the centurion, Oh, I'm just going to take this home. I'm not going to drink it. I'm just going to take it home in case somebody comes over. Baby, you warming your hands by the fire with the centurion, So I'm just going to buy this and keep it for Christmas. You done took the centurion home. You warming your hands, That time of testing. And you see, like Peter, and the book of books tells us, that Peter, after this, when he found out, he was so full of remorse, he wept bitterly. Now, when you and I did the same thing, after saying what we would not do, you did it anyhow. Anyway, because we were cowards. We were people pleasers. We didn't want to be ridiculed, What do people say if I don't take a drink? If I don't drink with them, this will destroy. And they look at me. And they say, well, look here, he don't drink anymore. No, I can't have you destroying my image. You just screwed your image up yourself when you took the drink, And you don't want to destroy your image. I want to be an all-around person. That's what Peter thought he was. And the humility that came to Peter when he found out at the time of testing he wasn't brave at all. The same thing that happened to me. I wasn't brave at all when the time of testing came. I couldn't stand the test. And it brought me the message of teachability, which is humility. And as we go on to our second step, we see another disciple. Oh, you're going to love him. He brings you the message of belief by experience. His name was Thomas. The second step, which tells me we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. Thomas, he was one of these people, he brings me the message of belief by experience. Many times one says, well, I'll tell you my opinion. Nobody gives a rap about your opinion or what your experience. There's just as many different opinions in this room as there is people. What we want is your experience. And here was Thomas. He was the doubter, Sometimes you and I, we put on the air of disbelief because we feel that it is. Yes? You ask him. He can talk louder than me. Come on, son.
Muriel Norris. There's a Kathy D that is very sick in the lobby. Muriel Morris. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite all right. So here we have this doubter. And many of us today are just like Thomas, the doubter. Disbelief. You see, Thomas, he said, I just simply cannot believe that our divine... I just don't want to adhere to the second step because when one comes to believe in a power greater than himself, he or she is afraid that they might change because change is very necessary. Many people might say, well, after all, I do not need God as I understand him or as you're telling me or understood him, whichever, because I am a self-made man. That's why you're so screwed up. You're self-made, I'll screw you up in a minute, see, And then again, I have my doubts. I ask him. I cannot believe. I'm asking him, and he's not helping me. Did you really ask him? See, action is the magic word. Helping him. He said, why? Did you really and truly ask? You see, if you want to get a taxi, you just don't go out there. You go out there in the street and you raise your hand. You know, you raise it like this. And when the taxi comes by, it don't just take your hand for a ride, it takes your whole being. So when one comes to believe in a power greater than himself, not part of you goes, but all of you go. You know? If you want an elevator, you don't just stand there and look at the thing, do you? You push the button. You know? And you get on. So one has to raise his voice and ask. Thomas said, I can believe if I can just put my hands or my finger into the nail prints and into his side. And our divine Lord said to Thomas, reach hither thy finger. You know, my friends, this is all that you and I have to do. There was a woman, you know, it takes action. There was a woman that had been ill for 18 long years with an issue. And she had tried everything under the sun. The book of books says so. If you don't believe it, read it. She had gone to doctors, to soothsayers, or whatever you go to in those days. All to no avail. She was still sick. And finally that day came, after having spent all. You ever get that feeling? Lord, I've done everything. After having spent all, she saw him in the crowd, and she said, if I can just but touch the hem of his garment. You see, my friends, when one can admit, accept, and surrender, you have touched the hem of his garment. He felt you, like he felt her. So why is it we will stand up and read the book, God could and would if he was sought, and then turn right around and say, I ain't helping me. Why? You know? See, poor Thomas only wanted to know that he knew. And that's the way a lot of you feel. That's the way a lot of us all feel. We only wanted to know that you really knew. You knew it, but you wanted to know that you knew it. You know, we ask a whole lot of goofy questions, you know, because we really and truly want to know that we knew it. See? And all I had to do was... See, I always believed that there was a God. But I didn't trust him because I felt maybe he didn't know the full particulars. If he knew how these people treated me, you know, maybe he just didn't understand about these things, you know. But I had to come to believe, and when one comes to believe, he comes to trust in a power greater than himself. And the third step, which reminds me so much of Matthew, whose name was Levi, he brings me the message of decision. See, Matthew was a tax collector. I guess you'd compare him with something about like the IRS, and nobody likes those people. You know, you don't even down like them today. Matthew was disturbed very much by his present life. He didn't like the way that he lived. You know? And he had to associate. See, I can identify with Matthew because I didn't like the way that I lived, but I had to associate with people that did the things that I did because other people didn't accept the things that I did. And so Matthew had to accept other tax collectors like himself. But he didn't like it. He didn't like it at all. Have you ever associated with people that you just couldn't stand, but they had the brown bag, so you put up with them, you know? And you go in the bar, you didn't like him. You didn't like her. But here was this person, the only type that's going to accept you. So naturally, I got to go along with you, but I didn't like you. I hated even now being around you. And you couldn't get in my house unless I saw you had a bag, you know? One bag to another, you know? Wasn't coming in my house. So. Matthew wandered out, but he didn't know what to do. Hence, in the third step where we are given the privilege of making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, you and I have a decision. Yeah. Something that alcohol never gave you in your life was the privilege of decision. When alcohol knocks you down on your knees, it says you better stay there. You know, try to get up. You ever get up on one knee and the other one falls off from under you? Don't help you. Bed's going around, you say, I'll catch it next time. See? But now you and I have the privilege of decision. So one day, as Matthew sat in his little booth collecting taxes, hating himself. Oh boy, didn't we hate ourselves. And how we lied and said you didn't, but you did. You hated yourself. I hated the things that I did, but I was powerless. And our divine Lord came by and he saw Matthew sitting there. And he said, come on, Matthew. His name was Levi. Then he said, come on, Levi. And the book of books tells me that Levi straightway left him. He didn't say, now, Lord, you're going down the road there and leave your telephone number. I'll pick up on you later. You know, he said that. He was so glad to get out of this mess that he was in that he said, he straightway. Third step, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I'm so glad that I don't have to worry with it. You know?
Turn the tape over now, please.
You know, or worry about it. Gratefulness. That's what that step gave me. You know, sometimes we think big deal. You know, oh yes, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Ask yourself, who else wants it? You know, you see, who else wants it? So, my friends, it is indeed a privilege to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And you see, now don't forget, you know, sometimes, you know, we read too fast. Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to God. It doesn't say that. It says, made a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God. You still got a decision. You can take it back anytime you want to. Anytime. It's not over to God, over to the care of. Take it back. You know, alcohol don't let you take your will back. No. When you take that, I'm not talking about you. When I say you, I mean Holly. See, that's the first step starts out with we, but you turn that W upside down and it becomes me, you know? Okay. So here's what happens. How many times have I said, I'm just going to take a couple of drinks and that's going to be it? And the alcohol says, that's what you think. Oh, no, you're not. Because I've made the decision. I let alcohol make the decision for me, you know? And I can't take it back, you know. It's like making love to a gorilla. You don't stop when he says so. Neil, your grandmother's not a nice lady. But see, here now, you and I, you know, have this privilege. I said I wasn't going to say any bad words this morning because it's Sunday, not unless it's necessary. You know, so. But as we travel on, we look at the fourth step. We meet another disciple. His name is Philip. He was called the common sense disciple. And that's all inventory is, made a searching and fill a small inventory of ourselves. It's plain common sense. Many times we may feel, well, I'm in the fellowship now, I don't need an inventory. I'm sober, I don't need to take inventory. You know, you can't throw a silk blanket over a mule and make a racehorse out of it now. It don't work like that. An inventory, my friends, is absolutely necessary, you know. Well, you know, I just don't feel that I need this inventory deal. I really don't, you know, because I've got it all straightened out in my mind, and I'm just not going to take an inventory. Why not? See, Philip lived in this little small town of Bethesda, which was a seaside town. And the sailors came there, and they would carouse and all that sort of thing, and Philip didn't like it there. And he felt, I'm going to run away. Like many times you and I feel like, I'm going to run away. But you see, when Philip met our divine Lord, Philip knew I can't change the town, but I can change me. And that's what happens when you and I are given the privilege, and all of it is a privilege, of taking an inventory. You see, sometimes another thing when we are frightened of inventory, like I was, we feel that there's nothing good in it at all. It's all bad. That's not true. You see, Philip said to his friend Nathaniel, he says, you know, I think I've met the one. He was talking about the master. He said, I think I've met the one. And Nathaniel says, oh no, I don't think so. Nothing good can come out of that little town. And Philip says, come see. And that's what you and I have to do in inventory. Take it. There's something there that possibly you can salvage, but first you got to come see. Like Philip told Nathaniel, come see, let's see. Because an inventory takes care of this that is good, that which needs to be repaired, and some of the things I need to get along with. But you see, running won't do it. And so still we go on saying that inventory is not necessary. It is necessary. How will I know unless I come see? So, well, I already know. No, come see. There's a whole lot of things that you and I have that we didn't know we had, that all we have to do is try to improve upon. Because if I don't, you know, there's another step right behind that. If I'm not going to take an inventory, there's not much I can do with the fifth step, then is there? But it's a tough one, and that's the fifth. Admitted to God, ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. That's a tough titty, but you need the milk. We call this step Judas, because it will betray you every time. Judas, just like Judas betrayed our divine Lord. He brings me the message of self-forgiveness. You see, so great was Judas's crime that he couldn't forgive himself, and he went out and he hung himself. How many of us today, because we cannot forgive ourselves, go and hang ourselves by the rope of self-condemnation? You know, oh, I can't forgive him. I get on your knees every night and ask God to forgive you, and then you get up and say, but I can't forgive me. So since when did you become a power so great that you can't forgive yourself? You know, but you ask God to, you know. See, here was Judas there, you know. He already had his plan in mind, what he was going to do. And the book of books says, and then Satan entered into Judas. This is what causes these fifth steps there, you know. You already had your mind made up you wasn't going to do right. Then you took that drink, and Satan entered in. Then you couldn't forgive yourself. And again, like Peter, you get full of remorse, and we weep bitterly. But the fifth step helps me to alleviate all of this. Admit it to God, ourselves. And another, I love these two words, another human being. Isn't that wonderful? To admit to another human being. We could have used just one word, admitted to God and ourselves and another person, but it says another human being. What do you mean? Compassion. You don't want to talk to somebody that says, oh, you did? What we want is compassion and understanding. You did, so did I. You know. So this is what happened. You did, so did I. See, the fifth step, there's no rationalization. Motive. That's what it is, the exact nature. Motive. Why? Well, I can rationalize that. No, there's no rationalization when it comes to that fifth step. Rationalization is like masturbation. You're just screwing yourself. You know? Now, that is the gospel according to St. Holly now, don't you? So now we move on to this sixth step. Entirely ready to have God. Remember now, entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And you and I will jump up and say, I can't do such and such a thing. Of course, nobody asked you to. Just see your name in the big book, it isn't in there. It says entirely ready to have God removed. See, it brings to mind the disciple by the name of Simon the Zealot. You see, Simon was one of those what you might call, in those, what we would call today a guerrilla warfare fighter. He was just so full of hate and all of that sort of thing, but he caused a lot of pain to people, like you and I do today. But we cannot do anything about the pain that we cause other people until we stop causing ourselves pain. How are you going to erase pain from someone else's heart and mind when you haven't done anything about your own? Entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Why? These things are painful. They're painful. No one wants to live with anything that is painful. If you would have got a tooth and it's hurting, then you go to the dentist and the dentist says, well, I think I'm going to have to pull that tooth out. And he says, oh no, it's my tooth, don't you dare touch it. Well, what did you go for? You didn't want to do something about it. I'm just saying. You certainly are not happy with it. Is one happy living with jealousy? That is painful, is it not? So we become entirely ready to have Almighty God remove it, Self-pity is painful. Do you want to live with that? So we get entirely ready to have God remove it because they hurt, In other words, they're malignant. And anxiety, oh God, that's contagious. It'll rub off on someone. So I have to become like St. Francis when he says, Lord, make me. Francis didn't want to do this. He says, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. He didn't say, Lord, could I become an instrument of your peace? He said, Lord, make me. It is so wonderful to be an heir to the love of God. You and I are all royalty. We haven't got any business walking around with our shoulders stooped over. We're royalty. And we should accept this. So in other words, my friends, when I look at that sixth step, I know there's not too much I can do about it, but to become willing, entirely willing to have Almighty God remove these, because they hurt me. And I can't do anything about the pain that I have caused others until I do something about the pain that is eating within me. And then the seventh step, which is so short, very insignificant, so it looks, it reminds me so much of a little bit. Oh, they tell me he was of a very small stature. Nathaniel Bartholomew. Humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. We think, oh my gracious, that's such a small step. Well, we don't pay any attention to that step. It's too small. Well, you know what the book of books says? Beware of the little foxes that gnaw at our vineyards, because our vines have tender grapes. It didn't say anything about great big ones. It said, beware of the little foxes. It said something about elephants and tigers. It says little foxes. Those little bitty things. See, in Nathaniel Bartholomew, he was one of those little small people. He was small of stature. But he made you know who he was. And that's what these little small things can do. You think they're small, but they'll make you know that they're there. You know? Now, if you walk down the street and you see an elephant coming down the street, oh, there's an elephant, I guess I better move over here. But all right, a gnat, a little N-A-T gnat can get in your house and it'll cause more hell than a one-legged man at a dance. Okay. He'll go buzzing, 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 you know? And he gets up on the ceiling, you say, I'm going to get him. And you jump up on the couch in your high heel shoes and your heel goes through the fabric and you hit him and he does one of them things at you, you know? Okay, and he comes back down, he lights on the lampshade, and you haul up and hit the lampshade and break the lamp. Little bitty thing. They'll make you know that they're there. Humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Now we have two other disciples, James and John, sons of thunder. Because they were, shall we say, full of love. John is known as a disciple of love. And my friends, it takes love. It takes love to make amends. I don't like making amends. But it has to be. It has to be. You know, why? Because I want peace with myself. And you know, many times in making amends, we start out, we do the Adam. You know, the first man that was ever created, Adam, you know. Here was Adam, you know, in the garden. We start out doing the Adam when it comes by blame placing. You don't make any amends. Start right away thinking, well, you know, so-and-so hadn't done such and such thing, I wouldn't have did such and such thing. So that's the reason why I should make any amends. That's what's called the Adam deal. So after Adam, but one of the beautiful things about it, when God got ready to get down on Adam's case, the book will tell you that he came walking in the cool of the day. See, that is one of the most beautiful things. See, you and I sometimes, when we're going to make amends or straighten a thing out, we start, shall we say, in the heat of the argument, or the heat of the day, or the heat of the situation. But the book of books tells me that God came walking in the cool of the day, after everything had quieted down a bit. You know, that's a good way to start it, you know. And he asked Adam a question. He says, Adam, where are you? Well, God knew where Adam was. But God wanted Adam to know where he was. Yeah. See, Adam didn't know where he was. See, Adam knew he had tore it. He knew he had tore it. So he says, you know, I hid. Lord, yeah, I heard you call me, but I hid. You know, and Adam knew he had tore it some kind of way there. So the first thing he did was start blame placing. God said, you know what you did, don't you? He said, well, yeah, but, you know, she did it. You know, I really think that's why men have Adam's apples today. He bit off something that got caught there and they weren't able to swallow it, you know. When it comes down to making amends, I've got to become willing to make amends. And I've got to try to do it through love before I do the Adam and go and hide to keep from making amends. You know? Have you ever seen anybody that you knew you should make amends to and you wouldn't hide? You go and hide to keep them talking to them. That's called the Adam. And then when you do have to do something about it, you say, well, you know, so-and-so did that first, but that step doesn't say that. It says made direct amends. That's a tough one, but it's there. Many times we don't want to make amends because we're afraid people might find out that we're human. And it hurts to be human, doesn't it, dear? When one is human, he loves, and he doesn't mind being loved in return. He doesn't have to go and hide. You know. So as we look again at a disciple that brings us a message, steadfastness. You see, the 10th step where we continue to take an inventory and when we're wrong, promptly admit it. Continue. There was a disciple by the name of Jude Thaddeus. His name was Judas, but his name was changed to Jude Thaddeus. For the simple reason is He didn't like that name anymore. You don't blame him, do you? There was stigma on it. Just like many of us, you know, but he brings us the message of steadfastness. What do we mean? How can I identify with this man? You know, every time you meet somebody, you know, that those of us that know no explanation is necessary. Those that don't know, there's none possible, so you don't go through all that rigmarole with them, you know. So here when we meet our boy Jude, as he was later called, he had to be steadfast, to continue on regardless of what the name was. How many times you and I don't want to be called an alcoholic because someone has said, well, you know, oh, you belong to that thing? Well, you know, honey, I knew an alcoholic and he did such and such a thing. Remain steadfast. He did that. You didn't do it. You didn't have anything to do with it. Well, you know, I wouldn't let him in. You know, he's going to ruin the program. He may ruin his program, but he ain't going to ruin mine. See? Because I remain steadfast. Continue to take a personal inventory, and when I'm wrong, promptly admit it, regardless of what anyone else says. You know. Sometimes a person might say, well, look, you go to that program, you know, this makes me, shall we say, I don't like to play second fiddle. Tell them to get out the band then if you don't want to play second fiddle. You know, there's always a trumpeter waiting to take your place, you know. So here it has to be this way, that I continue regardless because of this message, steadfastness. So when we come to the 11th step, we will deviate slightly, where we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. The reason why I say we will deviate slightly, because we're going to talk about Luke, you know. Luke was a physician. Luke he was born later, he did not walk with our divine Lord, but he wrote one of the most beautiful books that you'll ever read. And how I can identify with Luke was this. Luke being a physician and had not walked with our divine Lord, he had to go right to the source. He had to go and find out. For all of these things happened before he could write his book. Accuracy is what he needed, you know. And that's what you and I do in the 11th step. We seek through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact. Like Luke, he went to the source. And that's where the seat is, at the source of it, the 11th step. Sought through prayer and meditation. Not medication, meditation. That's what it says, you know. Mm-hmm. Because I will remember always that I am in the recovery room. As long as I am in this fellowship, I will be in the recovery room. Always, you know. Because I have had one of the greatest of all operations, given by the greatest of all physicians, known as a personality operation. When one has had an operation of any type, he is put in the recovery room where there is supposed to be a very efficient nurse constantly taking his or her 4 vital signs, your pulse, respiration, and what have you. You see, I know my 4 vital signs. Pride, fear, resentment, and self-pity are my 4. Those are the 4 vital signs of the average alcoholic. Pride, fear, resentment, and self-pity. And all I've got to do, I don't need anyone else to take them. I can call on the physician myself. Lord, something is out of whack here. One of my vital signs has gone amiss, and I have to watch that. But like Luke, I have to go to the source. And that is exactly where it is. You know, my friends, this beautiful 12th step that we have reminds me so much of a disciple by the name of Andrew, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps. You say, nothing ever happened to me. Did you read the step? It says, having had a spiritual experience as a result. Got that one little word there, result of these steps. We tried. It didn't say he was always great. It says we tried to carry the message. We tried. Yeah. Why do we try? We're like Andrew. You see, Andrew never wrote a book. You don't read no book in the Bible called the Book of Andrew. He didn't write it. But Andrew brought Peter, the greatest of all, to our divine Lord. But you know who Andrew brought first? Andrew brought Andrew first. Because obviously you cannot transmit that which you do not have. That's what the book says so. But Andrew brought Andrew. It says we tried. Why do we try? Because our divine Lord says when you are converted, strengthen your brother. Now don't get all tore up about the word converted. It simply means changed. When you are changed, strengthen your brother. That's a privilege. And another disciple says, but Lord, how far shall a man go with his fellow man? And our divine Lord said to the edge of the pit. But he didn't say nothing about falling off down in there with him, though. He says to the edge of the pit. Because we know that we are not going to be able to help everybody. We know that. But how much of a PhD do you have to carry the message? How much of an MSW do you have to tell somebody that you love them? Do you have to go to school to tell somebody that you love them? You know. I'm not against all these things, but no stretch of the imagination. See, that you don't have to study love, you live it. That's all you have to do. The important thing, my friends, is from this person that I cannot help. Because my ego tells me I'm so great I can help everybody. You know, there's a story about an eagle. And this eagle, he felt so great that day he was stretched his wings and he was flying around and he saw a seal that had just crawled up out of the water laying on the edge there wherever seals lay in the slime. And this eagle thought, I'm going to pull him out of there. I don't want him laying there. The seal don't want out of there. But the eagle feels, I'm going to get you out. So the eagle sticks his claws down in the seal. And he tugs one way. And the seal tugs another way. And the more the eagle tries to pull, the flesh of the seal begins to, shall we say, stick closely to the talons of the seal. And the tug of war begins. The seal pulling one way, the eagle pulling another way. Sounds like Al-Anon, doesn't it? Now, I'm young, but I love my Al-Anons. I love them fine. You know, they're nothing but alcoholics turned wrong side outwards anyway, you know. But you see what happened with the seal and the eagle? The eagle couldn't turn loose. And the seal drug him right on out there in the ocean and drowned him. Because he couldn't let go and let God, so he drowned him. That's why our divine Lord says to the edge of the pit. That's exactly why. You know? Because you see, my friends, as time goes on, and you and I know that we strengthen our fellow man. Because we gain in discipleship. What price? Discipleship. What is the price of discipleship? I'll tell you. It's very simple. You see, in this, let's take this convention here. We see people walking around with badges on so that we will know who they are. Chairman, speakers, hostess, ushers. They're part of it all. So they wear a badge. So how will one know that one has become, you know, that person has become a part of the convention? But how will one know when he has the badge of discipleship? But what our divine Lord told us, one simple thing. best one. And you and I, when we get that, we have it. He said, a new commandment that I give you, that you love one another. And by this shall all men know you are my disciples. God bless you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.